Marcus Chen had always been a creature of habit. Every Tuesday and Friday evening, he wheeled the large garbage bin from his apartment complex to the curb. The routine was simple, mindless, and gave him a few minutes of fresh air after long days programming. For a tech company downtown, the autumn wind carried the smell of fallen leaves and the distant hum of traffic as Marcus dragged the heavy bin across the cracked asphalt. The apartment complex was quiet at this hour. Most residents were inside watching television or cooking dinner. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows between the buildings. As he positioned the bin next to the others along the street, something caught his eye. A soft blue-green glow emanated from behind the dumpster near the building's rear entrance. Marcus paused, his hand still gripping the bin handle. The light pulsed gently, like a slow heartbeat. Probably just someone's discarded electronics, he thought. Maybe an old gaming console or broken television. But curiosity won over caution, and he found himself walking toward the glow. What he discovered made him stumble backward in shock. A woman sat hunched between two overflowing garbage bags, her back pressed against the brick wall of the building. But she wasn't human. Her skin had a pale silvery sheen that caught the light from the street lamps, and her hair fell in waves of deep purple that seemed to move on its own. Most striking were her eyes, large luminous orbs that shifted between blue and green, the source of the gentle glow he'd noticed. She wore what appeared to be a form-fitting bodysuit made of some metallic material, torn and dirty from her time among the refuse. Dark stains covered the fabric, and one sleeve was completely shredded, revealing more of that strange silvery skin underneath. The woman looked up at Marcus with those incredible eyes, and he saw something he recognized despite their obvious differences: exhaustion, fear, and a desperate kind of hope. She tried to stand but winced and collapsed back against the wall, clutching her side where the bodysuit was darkest with stains. Marcus's first instinct was to run. His second was to call the police. His third, the one he followed, was to help. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly, crouching down a few feet away from her. He kept his voice calm and his movements slow, the way he might approach a frightened animal. The woman tilted her head, studying him with those shifting eyes. When she spoke, her voice was like water flowing over stones, melodic but strained. The words were definitely not English, filled with sounds that seemed impossible for a human throat to make. Marcus held up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I don't understand," he said, "but you're hurt. Do you need help?" She watched him carefully, then pressed one hand to her injured side and pointed at him with the other. Even without a common language, her meaning was clear. Marcus looked around the empty parking lot. No one else was in sight, and the windows of the apartment building showed only the warm glow of normal human lives continuing obliviously. Whatever this woman was, wherever she'd come from, she'd chosen to hide among the garbage rather than reveal herself to the world. That suggested either wisdom or desperation, possibly both. "Okay," Marcus said mostly to himself. "Okay, let me think." The woman continued to watch him with those luminous eyes. Up close, he could see that her breathing was shallow and quick, and a thin line of something that might have been blood, though it was silver rather than red, trickled from the corner of her mouth. Marcus pulled out his phone, then stopped. Who exactly would he call? The hospital would want explanations he couldn't give. The police would have questions he couldn't answer. And something about the woman's fearful posture suggested that involving authorities might not be in her best interest. Instead, he opened his phone's translation app and selected the most common languages, hoping against hope that she might recognize something. He held the phone toward her and played simple phrases. "Hello? Help? Safe." The woman's eyes widened slightly at the device, but she showed no recognition of the words. However, when the app played help in what Marcus thought might be Arabic, she made a sound. Not quite the same, but similar enough that his heart jumped. Marcus tried a different approach. He pointed to himself and said Marcus several times. Then he pointed to her and raised his eyebrows questioningly. The woman seemed to understand. She touched her chest with one slender, long-fingered hand and made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus had no hope of pronouncing it correctly, but he nodded and repeated it as best he could. Her eyes seemed to brighten slightly. With amusement, he thought. "All right," Marcus said, struggling with the pronunciation of her name and settling on what sounded like Lyra in English. Lyra, I'm going to help you, but I need you to trust me. She didn't understand the words, but something in his tone must have conveyed his meaning. After a long moment, she nodded. Marcus looked around again, ensuring they were still unobserved. His apartment was on the first floor, with a sliding door that opened directly onto the parking lot. If he could get her there without being seen, he could figure out what to do next. He stood slowly and gestured toward his apartment, then held out his hand to help her up. Lyra studied his outstretched hand for several seconds before tentatively placing her own in it. Her skin was warm but felt different, smoother than human skin, with a subtle texture like very fine scales. As she struggled to stand, Marcus was struck by how light she seemed, as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. She took 2 steps before her legs gave out. Without thinking, Marcus caught her around the waist, supporting her weight. She tensed at the contact but didn't pull away. It's going to be okay, Marcus murmured, though he had no idea if that was true. Whatever happened to you, wherever you came from, you're safe now. As they made their slow way across the parking lot toward his apartment, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Behind them, the garbage bins sat in their neat row, keeping their secrets under the pale glow of the streetlights. Marcus's apartment was a typical programmer's den, cluttered with computer equipment, empty coffee cups, and stacks of technical manuals. Under normal circumstances, he might have been embarrassed by the mess. But as he helped Lyra through the sliding door and onto his couch, normal circumstances felt like a distant memory. She collapsed onto the cushions with a soft sound that might have been relief or pain. Her luminous eyes darted around the room, taking in everything with the careful attention of someone assessing potential threats and escape routes. When her gaze lingered on his multiple computer monitors, still glowing with lines of code from his work earlier, Marcus saw something like recognition flicker across her features. Technology, Marcus said, gesturing toward the computers. You know what that is, don't you? Lyra tilted her head and made that wind chime sound that seemed to be her name, followed by a longer phrase in her musical language. She pointed at the computers, then at herself, then made a complex gesture with her hands that looked almost like she was manipulating invisible objects in the air. Marcus felt a chill of excitement. She was familiar with technology, advanced technology if that gesture meant what he thought it did. But that raised even more questions about what she was doing hiding in the garbage behind his building. Let me get you some water, Marcus said, moving toward the kitchen. And we need to do something about that injury. He returned with a glass of water and his first aid kit, setting both on the coffee table where Lyra could see them. She examined the glass with curious intensity, holding it up to the light and watching the water swirl inside. When she finally took a sip, her eyes widened with what looked like surprise. Marcus opened the first aid kit and pulled out antiseptic wipes and bandages. But when he approached her injured side, Lyra shrank back with fear in her eyes. It's okay, Marcus said gently. I just want to help with your wound. Look. He demonstrated by opening one of the antiseptic wipes and cleaning a small scratch on his own arm, then applying a bandage. See? It helps healing. Lyra watched the demonstration with intense focus. After a moment, she nodded and carefully pulled back the torn section of her bodysuit. The injury underneath made Marcus's breath catch. It wasn't a cut or bruise like he'd expected, but something that looked almost like a burn, except the edges were too clean, too precise. The wound had an odd geometric pattern to it, as if it had been made by some kind of energy weapon rather than anything physical. Marcus cleaned the wound as gently as he could, noting how Lyra's silver blood seemed to clot differently than human blood, faster, and with tiny sparkles like glitter. She endured his ministrations without complaint, though he could see her muscles tensing with each touch. As he worked, Marcus's mind raced. Energy weapons, advanced technology, an alien woman hiding in garbage. None of it made sense, but one possibility kept returning to his thoughts, a possibility he hardly dared consider. When he finished bandaging her wound, Marcus sat back and looked at Lyra seriously. You're not from here, are you? Not from Earth? She didn't understand the words, but something in his tone made her meet his eyes. For a long moment, they studied each other across the vast gulf of species and language. Then Lyra raised one hand and pointed upward toward the ceiling, toward the sky beyond. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. First contact, He was sitting in his messy apartment having first contact with an extraterrestrial being, and she was injured and afraid and had somehow ended up hiding in his garbage dumpster. "Okay," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Okay, you're from up there, from space, from another planet." Lyra seemed to sense his acceptance of this impossible fact. Some of the tension left her shoulders, and she nodded once. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, trying to process the situation. "Right. So the question is, what happened to you? How did you end up here?" He grabbed a notebook and pen from his desk and began to draw simple pictures. He sketched a round shape for a planet, then a smaller shape leaving it, a spaceship. He showed the drawing to Lyra and pointed at her questioningly. Her eyes lit up with understanding. She took the pen with her long, graceful fingers and began to draw her own pictures. Her artistic skill was remarkable. In just a few quick strokes, she created an image of what was clearly a spacecraft, sleek and elegant. Unlike anything in human design, she drew more ships around it, larger, more angular vessels that somehow conveyed menace even in simple line drawings. She sketched energy beams between the ships, then showed her own vessel breaking away from the battle, trailing what looked like damage. Marcus watched as the story unfolded on paper. A space battle. Her ship damaged, fleeing. She drew the Earth as a small circle, her ship approaching it, then crashing. Her final drawing showed herself emerging from wreckage and hiding. "You're a refugee," Marcus breathed. "Your ship was attacked and you crashed here." Lyra looked up from the drawings and began speaking in her musical language, her voice rising with what sounded like urgency. She pointed to the drawing of the attacking ships, then to herself, then made a cutting gesture across her throat. The message was clear. Those who had attacked her were dangerous, and they might still be looking for her. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If hostile aliens were searching for Lyra, then the entire planet could be in danger. But looking at this injured, frightened woman sitting on his couch, he realized that his concern wasn't for the abstract threat to Earth. It was for her, personally. "They hurt you," he said softly, "and you're afraid they'll find you." Lyra's luminous eyes met his, and he saw the answer there. She was terrified, alone on an alien world with nowhere to turn and no one to trust. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed insane just an hour ago. "You can stay here," he said firmly, "as long as you need to. You're safe here." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone, the gesture as he pointed to her and then around the apartment. For the first time since he'd found her, something like hope flickered in her strange, beautiful eyes. Marcus settled back in his chair, looking at the alien woman on his couch. He thought about the life he'd been living just hours ago. Routine, predictable, safe. That life was gone now, replaced by something far more complicated and dangerous. But as Lyra carefully sipped her water and studied his apartment with growing curiosity rather than fear, Marcus realized he didn't regret his choice. Whatever came next, he wouldn't abandon her to face it alone. Outside, the night continued its normal rhythm. Cars passed on the street. People went about their ordinary human lives, completely unaware that first contact had just occurred in a cluttered apartment over a pile of first aid supplies and hand-drawn pictures. Marcus looked at Lyra again, noting how the soft light from his lamp seemed to make her skin shimmer like starlight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and possibly new dangers. But tonight, an alien woman was safe, warm, and no longer alone. And somehow, that felt like the most important thing in the universe. Marcus woke to the sound of soft humming. For a moment he lay in his bed confused, wondering if he'd left music playing on his computer. Then the previous night came rushing back and he sat up quickly. The humming was coming from the living room, a complex, layered melody that seemed to have harmonies even though only one voice was singing. Marcus pulled on a t-shirt and padded quietly to his bedroom door. Lyra sat cross-legged on his couch, facing the large window that looked out over the city. Her purple hair caught the morning sunlight streaming through the glass, and her skin seemed to glow more softly in the natural light. She held something in her hands, a small device that definitely hadn't been there the night before. "Good morning," Marcus said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned toward him, and he was struck again by the alien beauty of her features. In daylight, he could see that her skin wasn't just silver. It had an iridescent quality that shifted between silver and pale blue and the faintest hint of green. Her large eyes were clearer now, less clouded with pain and fear. She held up the device in her hands, a small crystalline object that pulsed with the same blue-green light as her eyes. When she spoke, Marcus was amazed to hear recognizable words mixed in with her musical language. "Good morning," she said carefully. The English words slightly distorted by her accent but clearly understandable. "Thank you, Marcus." Marcus stared at her in shock. "You learned English? Overnight?" Lyra gestured to the crystal device and spoke in her own language, then seemed to catch herself. She concentrated for a moment, and when she spoke again, more words were in English. "Learning device," she said, tapping the crystal. "Language and patterns, your computer." She gestured toward his setup in the corner. Connected, listened, learned. Marcus felt his jaw drop. "You hacked into my computer and downloaded the internet to learn English?" She tilted her head, clearly not understanding every word, but she smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her, and nodded. "Yes, hack, good word." Marcus sat down heavily in his chair, trying to process this. "How is that even possible?" "That device, technology different," Lyra said, holding up the crystal. "Not like yours, quantum consciousness interface. Difficult to explain in your words." "Try me," Marcus said. "I'm a programmer. I understand technology better than most humans." Lyra was quiet for a moment, clearly organizing her thoughts. When she spoke, her English was noticeably better than it had been just minutes before. "Your technology is external, separate from your minds. Our technology is integrated, connected to consciousness itself. This device," she held up the crystal, "connects my mind to information patterns, language, knowledge, understanding." Marcus leaned forward, fascinated despite the impossibility of what she was describing. "That's incredible. What you're talking about would revolutionize everything. Communication, education, human consciousness itself." Something sad flickered across Lyra's features. "Yes, that is why they hunt us." The weight of her words settled over the room like a dark cloud. Marcus had been so caught up in the wonder of her technology that he'd almost forgotten the danger she represented, and the danger she was in. "Who are they?" Marcus asked quietly. "The ones who attacked you?" Lyra set the crystal device aside and moved to the window, looking out at the city with its millions of unaware humans. "They call themselves the Dominion. They believe consciousness should be controlled, limited. They fear what happens when beings become truly connected to knowledge and each other." "And your people?" "We are called the Synthesis," Lyra said. "We believe consciousness should be free to grow, to connect, to become more than the sum of its parts. We share knowledge freely. We help other species develop their own consciousness technology." Marcus felt a chill as the implications became clear. "That's why they're hunting you. You represent everything they're against." "More than that," Lyra said, turning back to face him. "I am not just any synthesis. I am—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Developer, creator. I help design the consciousness interfaces that allow rapid learning, deep connection between minds. To the Dominion, I am dangerous." Marcus looked at this woman, this alien genius, who had been hiding in his garbage just 12 hours ago. "So they'll keep looking for you?" "Yes. And when they find me—" Lyra's voice trailed off, but her meaning was clear. "What about going home? Can't your people help you?" Lyra's shoulders sagged slightly. "My ship was badly damaged in the attack. The quantum communication array was destroyed. I cannot contact my people, and I do not know if they survived the battle." Marcus felt an unexpected surge of protective anger. This brilliant, peaceful woman was stranded on an alien world, hunted by enemies who wanted to kill her for the crime of helping others learn and grow. The injustice of it burned in his chest. "There has to be something we can do," he said firmly. "Some way to get a message to your people or—" "Marcus." Lyra's voice was gentle but firm. "You do not understand the full situation. The Dominion does not just hunt individuals. They conquer entire worlds. If they find me here, they will see humanity as contaminated, aligned with the synthesis." The room fell silent as Marcus absorbed this. "You're saying that if they find you on Earth, they'll attack humanity?" "Earth would be destroyed," Lyra confirmed quietly. "Every human life ended, to prevent the spread of consciousness technology." Marcus felt the weight of the entire world settling on his shoulders. Harboring Lyra wasn't just dangerous for him, It was potentially a death sentence for every person on the planet. But as he looked at her standing by the window, her alien features etched with guilt and sorrow, he realized his answer hadn't changed. "Then we make sure they don't find you," he said simply. Lyra's luminous eyes widened. "You would risk your entire species for one stranger?" "You're not a stranger anymore," Marcus said. "And besides, you said your people help other species develop consciousness technology. Maybe it's time humanity got that help." Lyra stared at him for a long moment. "You would want that? Even knowing the risks?" Marcus thought about humanity's endless struggles with communication, with understanding each other across cultural and linguistic barriers. He thought about the conflicts that arose from ignorance and fear, the problems that could be solved if people could truly understand each other. The risks of staying ignorant might be greater than the risks of growing, he said. Besides, if the Dominion conquers worlds to prevent consciousness development, then maybe the only way to be truly safe is to develop fast enough to defend ourselves. Lyra's expression shifted from surprise to something that looked like hope. "You think like the synthesis," she said. "This is why consciousness technology exists, to help beings grow beyond their current limitations." Marcus stood up and moved to stand beside her at the window. Below them, the city buzzed with human activity. People going to work, children walking to school, life continuing in blissful ignorance of the cosmic drama playing out in his apartment. "So where do we start?" Marcus asked. "How do we help humanity grow up fast enough to survive what's coming?" Lyra looked at him with something that might have been admiration. "First, we must repair my ship's communication array. If any of my people survived, they need to know about the Dominion's movements, and they need to know about humanity. And second," Lyra smiled, and for the first time since he'd found her, it wasn't tinged with sadness. "Second, we begin humanity's first lesson in consciousness technology. Starting with you." Marcus felt a thrill of excitement mixed with terror. His boring, predictable life was definitely over. But as he looked at Lyra's hopeful expression and thought about the possibilities she represented, he realized he was ready for whatever came next. The fate of two species might depend on what happened in his cluttered apartment over the next few days. But somehow, with this remarkable alien woman beside him, Marcus felt like they might actually have a chance. Marcus had always considered himself a decent programmer, but nothing had prepared him for the experience of having alien technology interface directly with his consciousness. The crystal device Lyra called a consciousness bridge sat warm against his forehead, held in place by what looked like a headband made of the same metallic material as her bodysuit. "Try to relax," Lyra said, her voice soothing. "Human neural patterns are intense, more chaotic than most species. It may be overwhelming at first." Marcus tried to steady his breathing as information began flowing into his mind. It started as a gentle trickle, basic concepts about quantum consciousness theory, the fundamental principles behind synthesis technology. But then the flow increased and Marcus gasped as his understanding expanded exponentially. He could suddenly perceive the quantum fields that underlied all matter, see the information patterns that connected every atom in the universe. The crystal device wasn't just teaching him about consciousness technology. It was temporarily upgrading his ability to comprehend it. "This is incredible," Marcus breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "I can see. Everything is connected. Every thought, every decision, it all creates ripples in the quantum field." Lyra smiled, though there was concern in her luminous eyes. "You are adapting faster than I expected. Most beings require days to reach this level of comprehension. Human brains are probably just wired differently," Marcus said, though he was finding it difficult to focus on speaking, when he could perceive the vast networks of information flowing around them. "We're really good at pattern recognition and making connections between disparate concepts." "Yes," Lyra said thoughtfully. "Your species' neuroplasticity is remarkable. It may be why the consciousness bridge is working so efficiently." Marcus spent the next hour learning the basics of synthesis technology, how consciousness could be used to manipulate quantum fields, how information could be stored and transmitted through quantum entanglement, how multiple minds could connect and share, understanding directly. But the most shocking revelation came when Lyra showed him the crashed remains of her ship. It wasn't hidden in some remote forest or buried in a crater. It was in Marcus's own apartment building, specifically in the abandoned storage room in the basement that no one had used in years. Lyra's ship had somehow compressed itself into a space barely larger than a closet, using technology that made Marcus's head spin even with the consciousness bridge enhancing his understanding. Dimensional folding, Lyra explained as they stood before what looked like a silver wall with strange geometric patterns etched into its surface. The ship exists in compressed space-time. The external dimensions you see are not the true size. Marcus reached out to touch the surface and felt a slight tingling sensation. How big is it really? Approximately the size of what you would call a small house, Lyra said. But the quantum compression is failing. Soon the ship will either restore to its normal dimensions, destroying much of your building, or collapse entirely into a quantum singularity. How long do we have? Perhaps 2 days. Marcus stared at the compressed ship, his enhanced mind racing through possibilities. What do you need to repair it? The quantum communication array requires rare elements that do not exist naturally on Earth, Lyra said sadly. And the consciousness interface that controls the dimensional folding is damaged beyond my ability to repair. But not beyond mine, Marcus said suddenly, an idea forming. Lyra looked at him in surprise. Marcus, you have only just learned the basics of our technology. The consciousness interface requires decades of training to understand fully. Maybe for your people, Marcus said, his excitement growing. But humans think differently. We're really good at taking something apart, figuring out how it works, and then building a better version from whatever materials we have on hand. Marcus began pacing, his mind working through the problem. The rare elements, what exactly do you need them for? Quantum resonance crystals to amplify consciousness signals across interstellar distances. What properties do these crystals have? Atomic structure, energy resonance patterns? Lyra described the crystal's characteristics and Marcus felt his enhanced understanding clicking pieces together. I think we can synthesize something close using Earth materials. It won't be as efficient as your original crystals, but it might work. And the consciousness interface? Marcus grinned. That's where human ingenuity comes in. Your technology is elegant and sophisticated, but it's also complex. Humans have a talent for finding simple solutions to complex problems. Over the next several hours, Marcus threw himself into the repair work with an intensity that surprised even him. Using the consciousness bridge, he could perceive the ship's quantum structure directly and identify the specific points of damage. But more importantly, he could see ways to fix those problems that wouldn't occur to someone trained in synthesis methods, where Lyra's people would use sophisticated quantum resonance crystals. Marcus jury-rigged a solution using modified computer, processors, and superconducting magnets salvaged from his building's old MRI machine. Apparently the previous tenant had been a medical research company, where the original consciousness interface required precise harmonic frequencies. Marcus created a rough but effective substitute using modified guitar tuners and speakers from a high-end audio system he borrowed from the empty apartment upstairs. This should not work, Lyra said, watching Marcus connect seemingly incompatible technologies with jury-rigged cables and improvised quantum bridges. The harmonic resonance alone should create cascading failures throughout the system. But it is working, Marcus pointed out, monitoring the readouts on his improvised instruments. The quantum field patterns are stabilizing, and the communication array is showing signs of power buildup. Lyra shook her head in amazement. Your species has an incredible ability to make functional systems from completely inadequate components. This level of improvisation, it would take my people years to develop solutions this creative. Marcus felt a surge of pride, though he tried to stay focused on the work. We've had a lot of practice making things work with whatever we have available. Human history is basically one long story of making do with insufficient resources. As the hours passed, Marcus's repairs began to show results. The ship's quantum compression field stabilized, preventing the catastrophic expansion that would have destroyed the building. The communication array slowly came online, its improvised components humming with barely contained energy. But the real breakthrough came when Marcus suggested connecting the ship's consciousness interface directly to Earth's internet. The quantum field patterns in your technology are similar to information networks, Marcus explained, his hands flying over his improvised controls. If we can bridge the gap between your quantum consciousness tech and our digital networks, we might be able to amplify the communication signal using the entire planet's information infrastructure. That is... Lyra paused, her luminous eyes wide with amazement. That is brilliant. And completely insane. The quantum feedback alone could overload every computer system on the planet. Or it could work, Marcus said with a grin. There's only one way to find out. The connection process was delicate work, requiring Marcus to interface with both human and alien technology simultaneously. With the consciousness bridge enhancing his perception, he could see the quantum patterns underlying both systems and find the precise points where they could be safely linked. When the connection finally stabilized, the results exceeded even Marcus's optimistic expectations. The ship's communication array, boosted by Earth's entire digital infrastructure, sent out a quantum signal that blazed across interstellar space like a beacon. It's working, Lyra whispered, tears of relief streaming down her silver cheeks. The signal is transmitting. If any of my people are alive, they will know where to find us. Marcus leaned back against the wall, exhausted but exhilarated. In less than 24 hours, he had learned the basics of consciousness technology and jury-rigged a communication system that connected two completely incompatible forms of technology. So what now? He asked. Lyra looked at him with an expression of profound respect and gratitude. Now we wait for a response, and we prepare humanity for what is coming. The Dominion? Yes. Our signal will attract not just the synthesis, but also our enemies. They will know that consciousness technology has reached Earth and they will come to destroy it. Lyra's expression grew determined. But with what you have accomplished today, Marcus, I believe humanity might be capable of more than anyone imagined, including the Dominion. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders once again, but this time it was accompanied by a sense of hope. Humanity might be young and inexperienced compared to the galactic civilizations that were coming their way, but they had something that apparently even advanced aliens found remarkable: the ability to find creative solutions to impossible problems. The universe was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they put their minds to it. The response came 18 hours after Marcus's improvised communication array sent its quantum beacon across the stars. But it wasn't the response Lyra had been hoping for. Marcus woke to the sound of alarms, not from any human technology, but from the alien ship's warning systems, which apparently could generate sounds that made every bone in his body vibrate with dread. Lyra was already awake, her face pale with fear as she monitored the crystalline displays that had materialized around the ship's main console. They found us, she said without looking up from the readings. 3 Dominion hunter ships approaching from the edge of your solar system. They will be here in approximately 6 hours. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Can we run? Get your ship working and escape? The dimensional compression system is still too damaged for interstellar travel, Lyra said, her fingers dancing over controls that looked like liquid light. And even if it weren't, Dominion hunters are faster than exploration vessels like mine. What about your people? Did they get the message? Lyra's expression grew more complex. Yes, a synthesis rescue fleet is coming, but they are farther away. They will not arrive for another 10 hours. The Dominion will reach Earth first. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, trying to think. So we need to hold them off for 4 hours. Hide you somehow, make them think Earth isn't worth their attention. Marcus. Lyra's voice was gentle but firm. You do not understand what Dominion hunters are capable of. They will scan this entire planet from orbit. They will find me within minutes of arrival. And when they do, they'll destroy Earth, Marcus finished. Right. So hiding isn't an option. He began pacing around the compressed ship, his mind racing. The consciousness bridge had been removed hours ago, but the enhanced understanding it had given him remained, allowing him to perceive quantum patterns and energy flows that would normally be invisible to human senses. What are their capabilities? Marcus asked. The hunter ships? Each vessel carries approximately 50 warriors, along with quantum disruption weapons capable of destabilizing a planet's core. Their consciousness shields make them immune to most synthesis technology, and their ships can phase through normal matter to avoid conventional weapons. Marcus stopped pacing. Wait, they can phase through normal matter? Yes. Dominion technology manipulates quantum probability fields to allow their ships to exist in a state of partial reality. Physical attacks simply pass through them, but consciousness-based attacks work? To some degree, yes, though their shields provide significant protection. Marcus felt an idea beginning to form. A crazy, desperate idea that would have been impossible without the understanding he'd gained from the consciousness bridge. Lyra, when you interfaced with Earth's internet yesterday, did you map the connections? The information pathways? Of course. It was necessary to route the communication signal properly. Show me. Lyra manipulated her crystalline controls, and suddenly Marcus could perceive Earth's entire digital infrastructure as a vast, glowing network of connections. Every computer, every smartphone, every connected device appeared as points of light connected by streams of information. It's beautiful, Marcus breathed. And it's everywhere. Every major city, every small town. Billions of connected devices all linked together. Yes, but Marcus, your internet cannot harm Dominion ships. Information networks do not possess the quantum resonance necessary to affect phase-shifted matter. Maybe not, Marcus said, his excitement growing. But what if we could turn the entire internet into a consciousness technology network? Lyra stared at him. That is impossible. Consciousness technology requires quantum interfaces, crystalline resonance chambers, harmonic frequency generators, Marcus interrupted. It requires creative humans with a talent for making impossible things work. Marcus began explaining his plan, and Lyra's expression shifted from disbelief to amazement to something approaching awe. You want to turn every connected device on Earth into a node in a planetary consciousness network, she said slowly, using the quantum resonance patterns we established yesterday as a template. Exactly. If the Dominion wants to destroy Earth to prevent consciousness technology from spreading, then let's give them consciousness technology on a scale they've never seen before. Every human mind connected, every computer linked, the entire planet functioning as one massive quantum consciousness interface. The computational requirements alone would be staggering, Lyra said. And the quantum feedback could kill billions of people if not properly controlled. Then we better do it right, Marcus said grimly. Because if we don't try, those same billions of people die anyway when the Dominion cracks the planet open. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her luminous eyes studying Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your species truly is remarkable, she said finally. Faced with extinction, your first instinct is to attempt something that even the synthesis would consider beyond their capabilities. Is that a yes? It is a yes, though if we are wrong, we will have just killed our own planet to save it from invaders. Marcus felt the familiar thrill of a coding challenge, amplified by the fact that the code he was about to write could either save or destroy human civilization. Right, so no pressure. The next 4 hours were the most intense of Marcus's life. Working together, he and Lyra began implementing a plan that was equal parts genius and madness. First, they modified the quantum resonance patterns that had connected the ship to Earth's internet, creating a harmonic frequency that could interface with standard computer processors. It was rough and elegant work, the alien equivalent of using duct tape to connect a quantum computer to a toaster. But it worked. Then, using the ship's still-functioning manufacturing systems, they began producing millions of tiny quantum resonance chips. Each chip was barely larger than a grain of rice, but when integrated into electronic devices, it could turn any computer into a basic consciousness interface. The distribution was the biggest challenge. They couldn't simply mail the chips to every computer owner on Earth. There wasn't time. Instead, Marcus came up with a solution that was audacious even by his standards. We're going to hack every connected device on the planet simultaneously, he explained to Lyra as his fingers flew over his keyboard. Push out a software update that will remotely activate the quantum resonance in any electronic device that contains certain rare Earth elements, which is basically every computer, smartphone and smart TV made in the last decade. Can you do that? I can do it, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. The question is whether the devices will be able to handle the quantum resonance without frying their circuits. As Marcus worked, Lyra used the ship's sensors to monitor the approaching Dominion vessels. They were making good time, their phase-shifted engines allowing them to ignore the gravitational effects that would slow normal spacecraft. 2 hours until they reach Earth orbit, Lyra reported. Their scanning beams are already active. They're looking for quantum consciousness signatures. Then let's give them more signatures than they know what to do with, Marcus muttered, executing the final lines of code. The activation was simultaneous and global. Every smartphone, every laptop, every smart TV and internet-connected appliance on Earth suddenly became a node in humanity's first planetary consciousness network. The quantum resonance spread through the Internet's infrastructure like lightning, connecting devices, servers, and ultimately human minds in a web of shared awareness. Marcus felt the moment when the network came fully online. Suddenly, he could sense the consciousness of every human being on the planet. Not their thoughts or memories, but their essential awareness, their capacity for understanding and growth. Billions of minds, each unique but now connected in a vast tapestry of human consciousness. "It's working," Lyra said, her voice filled with wonder as she monitored the quantum readings. "The resonance patterns are stable. The network it's incredible, Marcus. The quantum consciousness field being generated by your planet is unlike anything I've ever seen." "What makes it different?" "The complexity, the chaos. Most consciousness networks are harmonious, ordered. But humanity's network is wild, unpredictable, full of contradictions and conflicts and brilliant flashes of insight. It's like the quantum equivalent of jazz music." Marcus grinned despite the approaching danger. That sounds about right for humanity. But their celebration was short-lived. Lyra's display suddenly flared with alarm signals. "The Dominion ships have detected the consciousness field," she reported. They're accelerating. They'll be here in 40 minutes, not 2 hours. Can they break through the network's defenses?" Lyra studied the readings, her expression growing grim. "I don't know. Your network is more powerful than anything the Dominion has faced before. But they have weapons specifically designed to disrupt consciousness fields. If they can create enough quantum interference, they could collapse the entire network," Marcus finished, "and kill every connected human in the process." The plan had worked. They had created a planetary consciousness network that should, in theory, be able to defend against Dominion phase-shifting technology. But they had also just turned every human being on Earth into a potential casualty of a quantum war. As Marcus looked at the display showing the approach, the Dominion ships materialized in Earth's upper atmosphere like 3 dark stars, their hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Marcus watched them through the ship's sensors, feeling the collective anxiety of 7 billion human minds suddenly connected to his consciousness. "They're beginning their scan," Lyra reported, her voice tight with tension. "Quantum disruption beams are charging. They're preparing to destabilize the consciousness network." Marcus could feel it too. A pressure, building against the edges of human awareness, as the Dominion vessels probed the planetary network for weaknesses. But something was wrong with their approach. The enemy ships seemed hesitant, uncertain. "They're confused," Marcus realized. "They've never encountered a consciousness network like this before." "What do you mean?" Marcus gestured to the quantum displays showing the swirling patterns of human consciousness. "Look at the network structure. Every other consciousness network the Dominion has faced was probably organized hierarchical, with clear command structures. But humanity's network is chaotic," Lyra finished, "completely decentralized. There's no single point of failure for them to target." "Exactly. They're trying to find the network's central control system. But there isn't one. Every human mind is both a node and a controller. Every connection is both a pathway and a destination." As if responding to their analysis, the Dominion ships suddenly changed tactics. Instead of probing for weaknesses, they began broadcasting a powerful quantum interference signal designed to overload and collapse consciousness networks through brute force. The attack hit like a psychic tsunami. Marcus felt 7 billion human minds cry out in pain as the Dominion interference tore through their connections. Children began screaming in classrooms. Adults collapsed at their desks. Elderly people in nursing homes clutched their heads as alien thoughts invaded their consciousness. But then something remarkable happened. Humanity began to adapt. Instead of collapsing under the assault, the human consciousness network began to evolve. Individual minds that were overwhelmed by the interference started connecting to others, sharing the load, distributing the pain until it became manageable. Groups of connected humans began working together to filter out the Dominion signal, turning the chaos of human thought into a kind of quantum white noise that confused and frustrated the attackers. "They're learning," Lyra said in amazement. "The network is learning to defend itself in real time." Marcus could feel it happening through his connection to the global consciousness. Teachers were instinctively reaching out to protect their students' minds. Scientists were collaborating across continents to understand and counter the alien interference. Artists were creating mental images so beautiful and powerful that they served as shields against the Dominion's psychic attacks. But most remarkably, ordinary people, factory workers and farmers, store clerks and taxi drivers, were finding ways to contribute to the defense that no military strategist could have predicted. A grandmother in Iowa began humming a lullaby that somehow resonated with the quantum frequencies, providing healing and comfort to millions of minds. A teenager in Tokyo started playing a video game, and the patterns of his gameplay became a defensive algorithm that protected entire cities from psychic assault. "This is impossible," came a broadcast from the lead Dominion ship, translated automatically by Lyra's systems. "Consciousness networks do not behave this way. There must be central coordination." "There is," Marcus said, speaking through the ship's communication array. "It's called humanity." The response from the Dominion commander was swift and brutal. "Then humanity will be destroyed." All three ships focused quantum disruption beams on the primary population centers. "We will burn out their consciousness network node by node." The ships began to glow with malevolent energy as they prepared to unleash weapons that could lobotomize entire cities. But Marcus was already one step ahead. "Lyra, can you route the ship's consciousness interface through the global network?" "Yes, but why would you?" Lyra's eyes widened as she understood. "Marcus, no. The feedback could kill you, or it could give me access to the combined problem-solving ability of 7 billion human minds," Marcus said grimly. "Right now, that's our only chance." Marcus placed his hands on the ship's consciousness interface, feeling the familiar tingle as alien technology merged with his awareness. But this time, instead of connecting to just one enhanced human mind, the interface connected to the entire planetary network. The sensation was indescribable. Marcus suddenly had access not just to his own thoughts and knowledge, but to the collective intelligence of the entire human species. Every human who had ever lived, every discovery ever made, every moment of creativity and inspiration in human history became available to him through the quantum consciousness field. And humanity, in turn, gained access to the knowledge of consciousness technology that Marcus had learned from Lyra. The effect was immediate and devastating for the Dominion. 7 billion human minds, suddenly enhanced with consciousness technology and connected in ways they had never imagined, began to work together with a coordination and creativity that even the synthesis had never achieved. Engineers in Germany began collaborating with physicists in Japan to develop quantum shields. Computer programmers in Silicon Valley worked with mathematicians in India to create defensive algorithms. Children in schools around the world began drawing pictures that, when viewed through the consciousness network, became powerful symbols that disrupted Dominion targeting systems. But the real surprise came when humanity began to attack back. The Dominion ships relied on their phase-shifting technology to remain untouchable, existing partially outside normal reality. But human consciousness, amplified by the global network and guided by Marcus's understanding of quantum mechanics, began to do something unprecedented. It started redefining what normal reality meant. "Impossible," the Dominion commander broadcast again, but this time his voice carried notes of fear. "They're altering quantum probability fields at a planetary scale. No species develops this capability without millennia of advancement." Marcus smiled grimly as he felt 7 billion human minds working together to solve the problem of how to hit targets that existed in phase-shifted space. The solution, when it came, was typically human in its elegant simplicity. If the Dominion ships existed partially outside reality, then humanity would simply expand the definition of reality to include them. The planetary consciousness network began generating what could only be described as quantum imagination, using the collective creative power of the human species to literally think the Dominion ships back into normal space-time. Artists visualized them as solid. Writers described them in vivid detail. Scientists calculated their exact positions, and engineers designed weapons to target them. The effect was gradual at first, then sudden and overwhelming. The Dominion ships began to flicker in and out of phase-shifted space, their quantum states becoming unstable as billions of human minds refused to accept their partial existence. "All ships, emergency retreat," the Dominion commander ordered. "The consciousness network is destabilizing our quantum matrices." But it was too late. As the ships tried to phase shift away from Earth, They found themselves trapped in a web of human consciousness that had redefined the very nature of space and time in the local area. Instead of escaping, they began to materialize fully in normal space, where they could be targeted by both conventional weapons and consciousness-based attacks. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. Earth's military forces, suddenly coordinated by a planetary consciousness network and guided by quantum-enhanced targeting systems, unleashed everything they had. But more importantly, 7 billion human minds working together created defensive and offensive capabilities that the Dominion had never encountered. Children's fears became psychic weapons that drove Dominion warriors insane. Mothers' protective instincts generated quantum shields that deflected energy weapons. Artists' creativity spawned defensive illusions that confused enemy sensors. Scientists' curiosity turned into quantum probes that dissected Dominion technology in real time. Within an hour, all 3 Dominion ships were either destroyed or fleeing toward the edge of the solar system. Marcus collapsed back from the consciousness interface, his mind reeling from the experience of being connected to the entire human species. Lyra caught him as he fell, her luminous eyes wide with amazement. "What you just accomplished," she said softly. "It should have been impossible. The Dominion has conquered hundreds of worlds, destroyed countless civilizations. They have never been defeated like this." Marcus managed a weak smile. "They never fought humanity before." "No," Lyra agreed. "They fought individual worlds, single species with traditional consciousness networks. But humanity—" She gestured toward the displays showing the still active global network, where billions of human minds continued to communicate and collaborate in ways that had never existed before. Humanity just turned an invasion into the greatest leap forward in consciousness evolution that the galaxy has ever seen. Marcus looked out through the ship's sensors at the Earth below, where 7 billion people were slowly coming to terms with their new connection to each other and the universe. The consciousness network was stabilizing. 3 months after the battle for Earth, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the first human-built consciousness research station, watching the construction of humanity's first interstellar fleet. The ships were unlike anything that had existed before, hybrid designs that combined human engineering ingenuity with synthesis, consciousness technology, and materials salvaged from defeated Dominion vessels. The global consciousness network had evolved far beyond what Marcus and Lyra had originally created. What had started as an emergency defense system had become the foundation of a new kind of human civilization. People could still disconnect from the network if they chose, but most found that the benefits of shared knowledge and understanding far outweighed any concerns about privacy crime. Rates had plummeted as it became nearly impossible to deceive or harm others when their pain was shared across the network. Scientific advancement had accelerated exponentially, as researchers around the world could share insights instantaneously. Art and music had exploded into new forms that could be experienced directly through consciousness, rather than just seen or heard. But perhaps most importantly, humanity had gained something they had never possessed before: true understanding of each other across all barriers of language, culture, and ideology. "The synthesis fleet will arrive tomorrow," Lyra said, joining Marcus at the observation window. Her appearance had changed over the past months. The fear and exhaustion that had marked her features when he first found her had been replaced by something like joy. She wore human clothes now, jeans and a sweater that Marcus had bought for her, though her purple hair and luminous eyes still marked her as otherworldly. "Are you nervous about seeing your people again?" Marcus asked. Lyra considered the question. "Excited, more than nervous. The messages we've received indicate that news of humanity's victory over the Dominion has spread throughout synthesis space. Your species has become something of a legend." Marcus laughed. "A legend? For what exactly?" "For proving that consciousness evolution doesn't require millennia of careful development," Lyra explained. "Your species went from no consciousness technology to planetary network integration in less than a week. You defeated a Dominion battle group using weapons that technically shouldn't exist. And you did it all while maintaining your individuality and cultural diversity." Through the observation window, Marcus could see teams of human and synthesis engineers working together on the new ships. The synthesis rescue fleet that had arrived weeks after the battle had brought not conquerors or saviors, but partners eager to learn from humanity's unique approach to consciousness technology. What do you think happens next? Marcus asked. Lyra smiled, and Marcus felt the warm glow of her thoughts through their consciousness link. Over the months, their connection had deepened beyond mere communication. They could share emotions, memories, even dreams when they chose to. The Dominion is regrouping, Lyra said. Our intelligence suggests they're preparing a massive fleet to return to Earth. But they're also facing rebellions on dozens of worlds they previously conquered. News of humanity's victory has inspired other species to resist Dominion control. So we're going to be at the center of a galactic war. You already are, Lyra pointed out. But this time it's a war that might actually be winnable. The Dominion's greatest weapon has always been the belief that their way is inevitable, that consciousness must be controlled and limited. Humanity proved that's not true. Marcus thought about the millions of humans who were now learning consciousness technology, not as subjects to be controlled, but as partners in the galaxy's future. Human creativity was already producing innovations that amazed even veteran synthesis scientists. Earth's musicians were composing symphonies that could be experienced as pure emotion. Engineers were designing spacecraft that responded to their pilots' thoughts as naturally as breathing. Artists were creating works that existed in quantum space, visible only to consciousness-enhanced perception. I keep thinking about that night I found you in the garbage, Marcus said. If I had just called the police instead of helping you, then humanity would have remained isolated until the Dominion arrived in force, Lyra finished. Your planet would have been sterilized and the galaxy would have lost something precious before it even knew it existed. Marcus nodded, still awed by how drastically his life had changed from a simple act of compassion. Do you ever regret it? How complicated everything became. Lyra's response came not through words but through the consciousness link, a flood of warmth, gratitude, and something deeper that Marcus had learned to recognize as love, though it was love of a kind that could only exist between minds that could truly know each other. Never, she said aloud, though I admit I'm curious about what our children will be like. Marcus nearly choked on the coffee he'd been drinking. Children? The synthesis medical team has confirmed that our species are compatible, Lyra said with scientific matter-of-factness that didn't quite hide her amusement at his reaction. Human synthesis hybrids would likely possess enhanced consciousness abilities from birth, combined with human creativity and adaptability. Such individuals could bridge the gap between our species even more effectively. Marcus felt his mind spinning with possibilities and implications. Are you proposing? I'm stating a biological fact, Lyra said primly. Though if you wanted to interpret it as a proposal, I wouldn't object. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the research station. Not emergency alarms, but the musical tones that indicated incoming messages through the consciousness network. Marcus closed his eyes and opened his awareness to the global network. Immediately, he was flooded with information from across the solar system. The advanced scouts of the synthesis fleet had detected something approaching from deep space. Not Dominion ships, but something else entirely. What is it? Lyra asked, though she was already connecting to the network herself. The answer came from the consciousness link of Commander Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister, who was leading the patrol fleet at the edge of the solar system. Her thoughts carried images and sensor data that made Marcus's heart race with excitement and apprehension. Approaching Earth was a massive fleet of ships from dozens of different species, refugees, rebels, and freedom fighters from across the galaxy, who had heard about humanity's victory and come seeking alliance. Some were synthesis vessels carrying scientists and engineers. Others were ships from species Marcus had never heard of, all united by their desire to resist Dominion control. But most remarkably, some of the approaching vessels were Dominion ships whose crews had mutinied, choosing freedom over the rigid hierarchy that had defined their empire for millennia. They're coming to us, Marcus said in wonder. All of them. Synthesis rebels, even Dominion defectors. They're coming to Earth to learn about consciousness freedom. Lyra's smile was radiant. Did you really think humanity's impact would be limited to one battle? You've started a revolution, Marcus. A consciousness revolution that's spreading across the entire galaxy. Marcus looked out at the construction yards where humans and aliens worked side by side, building ships that would carry the principles of consciousness freedom to the stars. In just a few months, humanity had gone from an isolated species to the center of a galactic movement. So what do we do now? Marcus asked. Now, Lyra said, taking his hand. We show the galaxy what happens when consciousness is truly free. We explore, we learn, we create, and we defend those freedoms for everyone who seeks them. Marcus felt the warm pulse of the global consciousness network around him, connecting him to billions of human minds and increasingly to alien consciousnesses as well. Through that network, he could sense the approach of the refugee fleet, could feel the hope and determination of countless beings who had chosen freedom over safety. The woman who had emerged from the trash behind his apartment building had brought him the greatest adventure in human history. But more than that, she had helped humanity discover its true potential, not as conquerors or subjects, but as gardeners of consciousness, helping intelligence and creativity flourish wherever they were found. "I love you too," Marcus said, answering Lyra's earlier emotional communication. "And yes, let's see what our children can accomplish." As they stood together watching the stars, Marcus couldn't help but smile. Humanity had always been good at making the impossible possible. Now they had the entire galaxy to prove it to. The universe would never be the same, and Marcus couldn't wait to see what came next. In the distance, the first ships of the refugee fleet began dropping out of faster-than-light travel, their hulls gleaming with hope in the light of Earth's sun. The consciousness revolution had begun, and at its heart was a simple truth that humanity had always known, but never been able to share until now. Freedom was worth fighting for, and when beings chose to stand together, there was nothing they couldn't accomplish. The real adventure was just beginning.